Hello, this is Leanne Wendt, and I'm presenting my PowerPoint presentation on practice change simulation, and it's the end of 12-hour nursing shifts. The objectives of my presentation is to appraise research and summarize the knowledge available on 12-hour shifts, outline a strategic plan for implementation of a practice change in nursing environment, description of how implementation of practice change will operate, and a description of theoretical model that will be used and how barriers will be overcome, sources and internal data that will be used, and describe evaluation methods of implementation. So why do we do 12-hour nursing shifts? One of the reasons is because managers believe it is cost effective. It allows for continuity of care in that in a 24-hour period, only 2 handoffs occur as opposed to 3. So this allows less information to fall between the cracks, and the continuity of care for the patient is better. Some nurses prefer longer shifts to allow for more time away from work. Most of the nurses, and this is changing, but a lot of the nurses are female, and a lot of them are mothers and wives who are trying to keep the home fires burning. So this allows them more days off, and they can have more flexible childcare. In some cases, as a full-time equivalent would only work 3 days out of 7 instead of 5, so that saves them 2 days of daycare, which is substantial. There are increasing concerns over effective 12-hour shifts on nurses and quality of patient care, but nurses overall seem to like 12-hour shifts, even though it's exhausting and there are problems with it, which I will present in this presentation. So 12 hours allows for nurses to work less days in a week, but often they will choose to work overtime because they need the money, or the 12-hour shifts actually turn out to be 14-hour shifts, and this leads to nursing fatigue, which can lead to death for the patient and for the nurse. I would like to highlight a case of a nurse that was killed because of nursing fatigue, and her name was Elizabeth Jasper. She's from Ohio, and she was driving her small SUV home after 3 12-hour day shifts that actually turned out to be longer because she was a nurse that had specific skills, and so they had asked her to stay a couple hours overtime each day. So in the 3 days, she'd probably worked around 40 hours. On the way home, she fell asleep with a will, and she left the road and went airborne and hit a tree. She eventually landed into a parking lot, and you could tell by looking at the car that no one would have been left alive inside. In fact, was instantly killed. Her family filed a lawsuit against the hospital for her work hours. That not only did they request her to work 12 hours, but over and above and beyond that because of her specified skills. So in her honor, I posted her picture. This is her. This is her car. And that causes one to pause. And it's very sobering to look at that. And it's very easy to understand how she would have fallen asleep at the wheel. It happens in a second. The next case I would like to highlight was a case of medication error from a nurse that had been overworked. Too many long shifts, too many hours, not enough staff in the ER. This case was very famous a couple years ago. It happened in 2017 in Vanderbilt in Tennessee. Nurse Bout was giving a patient, Charlene Murphy, a dose of an anti-anxiety. Well, she was trying to give her a dose of an anti-anxiety medication called midazolam, which is the brand name is Versed. And this was because the patient, Charlene Murphy, was about to go get a scan for subdural hematoma. And Charlene was about 70 years old. Well, while pulling up the drug on the AccuDose, Nurse Bout only put the letters VE in, and instead of Versed coming up, a paralytic drug called vecuronium came up, and without checking the right dose, the right drug, the right patient, etc., she pulled out this vecuronium, and it was a paralytic drug that caused Murphy unable to breathe. Basically, her lungs became paralyzed, and her brain became anoxic, an anoxic injury, and she died 12 hours later. This was blamed on nursing fatigue and just being in a hurry and not taking care. So here's the vecuronium, and here's Versed. They don't look alike in the bottle, but pulled up in the AccuDose. You can see how that could happen, especially if you're exhausted. So the negative research on 12-hour shifts is nurses who work 12-hour shifts over 8 hours made 3 times the amount of medication errors. What I found interesting was there was an increase of blood-borne pathogen exposures to nurses that worked the 12-hour shift over the 8 hours, especially during the last 2 hours. And I'm not really sure why that is, but that is the study. There's increased chance of needle sticks on nurses after 12 hours, and 2/3 of the 12-hour shift nurses had an episode of drowsy driving incidents within a 4-week period. Also, and this makes sense, 17% increase of musculoskeletal disorders. Oops. Nursing burnout ratios are higher, patient care satisfaction rates are decreased. Nurses report fatigue and exhaustion, and the sleep in between these 12-hour shifts is only 5.5 hours. For me, that was not even near enough to think clearly and do critical thinking. And fragmented sleep patterns can lead to depression and poor eating habits. So subsequent adverse effects of 12-hour shifts are felt for nurses and patients alike. So my plan would be to formulate a team to put into place an 8-hour shifts only, with the opportunity to work a 12-hour shift after every 3 8-hour shifts on a trial basis. This team would educate the staff on the disadvantages of 12-hour nursing staff and hopefully generate some excitement, enthusiasm about the benefits, and create a shared vision and create an atmosphere of readiness to change. And there'd be constant communication between the staff about this change through emails and WebEds and meetings. And after this had been trialed, there would be an opportunity for feedback to be presented from the staff, and the team in charge of the change would have to be flexible in changing what needed to be changed. And this is based on the Stettler model, which I love because it's clear and concise. Phase 1, preparation. Phase 2, validation. Phase 3, comparative evaluation to decision making. And Phase 4, translation and application. And Phase 5, evaluation. Very cut and dry. Nothing mysterious about the Stettler model, and that's my most favorite model out of all the ones that we studied. Sources for internal evidence would be human resources, patient relations, electronic medical records, and even government statistical websites such as hhs.gov. I looked that up, and there's some cool stuff on there. Here's my references, and this is the end of my presentation, and I've gone a minute over. Have a great day.